Hi guys, I'm so sorry. I was having trouble connecting.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Me too. I'm so sorry. I was having trouble connecting. I reinstalled my whole computer, like clean install of everything. Finished it yesterday. No, 2 days ago. Well, yesterday I finished it. And I ran into some problems I wasn't expecting to run. And then when I was trying to open the VDI, my Firefox wasn't working, and I was just jiggling trying to fix it, and suddenly I looked up and I'm like, oh shoot, it's past 9. It's like, run desperately. Yeah, I was having let me see if I can. I checked in with tech support and they gave me some ideas and it worked. But then when I suddenly came back, I'm like, oh no, it's 9:05. So hi guys, hi. Sorry.
Hi.
It's amazing how long things take when you don't, I'm like talking with tech support.
I can really fly when you're on the computer.
Yeah. When you try to fix a problem, you know how you can spend hours. Next thing you raise your hand and it's like, oh my God, how did time go by? So anyway, head over to the chat, please. And let's get that situation going. Anyway, the good news is I was able to connect to VDI. So it was just I had to reset, reinstall my Firefox. So hi guys. I want to start by saying something that isn't really about Photoshop, but about all classes. I've been getting a lot of emails. I have said it in the past, but then this whole session, I haven't told it to anyone. So now I'm telling it to everyone in each class. Getting a lot of emails saying, can't make it today, I'll watch the recording, which that's fine if you can't make it today to watch the recording. In fact, that's what you should do. But there's something I just need to be clear is that the recording is not instead of being here in class, not because I'm, hardcore, oh, you have to be here, but you have to be here because it's way the class is free. The class is free because we get paid by the state for your attendance. Someone has, mute you guys because someone has the radio or something. I'm going to mute everyone because I can't tell who it is. Someone's talking in the background. So I just muted everyone. If you want to talk to me, you have to mute yourself. Anyway, so the classes are free because everyone who shows up, school gets paid for people who show up, not for people who are registered. So the issue of the recordings has been a big deal in the state, I mean, everywhere, because people like the recordings, but then they don't attend. And so I cannot give you attendance. And so then the class looks very underreported, enrolled, and then they can't offer it for free. Long story short, if you need to miss the class because you truly can't make a single second of it, then go ahead, miss it and watch the recording. That's what, it is to miss a class, to just be absent. But if you can, because you have like half an hour that is free or 10 minutes that's free in that 9 to 11:30, just connect even with your phone. If you connect because you have to be at a doctor's or something's happening or you're traveling, just connect it with Zoom on your phone even for a little while, because the moment you connect, the computer records your attendance. And then with your attendance, I can then say he watched the video and then give you full attendance for that day. You know what I mean? But if you just watch the video, but you're not here, you get the knowledge, which is great. We don't get the money, which is not great. Does that make sense? So do your best to pop in, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour out of the 2.5 hours, whatever you can. All right, cool. Thank you, Peggy. You're a good example. All right. So everyone who is on VDI, don't forget to sign into the pipeline each time, the Google Drive, make that one new so that we don't have issues with the files being corrupted. So you have to just a new Google Drive each time we open up. And that's it. And then other than that, I'm going to have us just pop into Bridge. Okay. And I'll share my screen. Give me a second here. And we'll get going. So what feedback do you have with something that you made this week? I've discovered a new tool that I'm going to set up. I'm going to send you the information. Many times when you guys do something at home, it's hard for you to share it with me. When we were in real life, you could bring it, we could show it, but now you can't put it in the Google Drive. I've been asking you to email it to me. Sometimes the emails fall through because I receive like 100 a day. So I'm taking a class myself, a professional development class, where there's this tool that's really cool. I'm going to see if I can set it up for you guys to drop classes that you work on there. So you'll receive an email from me. It's something called a Padlet, and it's you have to create an account, which is just put in your name and sign in. That's it. It's tiny, or not even. You don't even need to create an account if I send you my link. And then all you need to do is just upload the images into that, and it's something that we can all look at and share and make comments on and tell me what you were trying to do. It's really cool. So I'm gonna get a bit more experience in it, and then I'll tell you about it because it'll be fun. Okay, so let's go ahead and make sure that you have oh, let me share my screen. Before I share my screen, that's true. I was asking you any feedback, anything. Did anyone do something that they want to share, or questions that they have?
I have a question, Diana.
Okay, and you know what? Two people's tried to talk, which is fine, but the good news is raise your little digital hand and then you kind of go in line, and then I answer people in line. But anyway, Dorothy, I heard you first. So yeah, Dorothy.
I didn't read the instructions right, and I went straight to Camera Raw and did some adjustments instead of going to, doing some adjustment level things and stuff. So if you make some adjustments in Camera Raw, then can you go back into Photoshop and make other adjustments?
That's a great point. We're going to talk a bit more about that. But remember how the other day I had you open a JPEG in Photoshop and then do Camera Raw from inside of Photoshop, right? But the other option, and Dorothy knows she's done this before, you can just go directly to Camera Raw and do fixings in there. So then the question is, can you still do, there's two things. You can either open it directly in Photoshop without your corrections, so start from 0 again in Photoshop, or you can do your corrections in Raw and open the already corrected one in Photoshop and then move on from there. So there's like, you can mix it and match it whichever way you prefer. So now we're going to be practicing the other way around, which is from outside, so to say, from Bridge straight into Raw and then into Photoshop. Last week we did from Bridge into Photoshop, right? And we did some fixings in Photoshop, and then we did some fixings in Raw. And my request as homework was that you guys do that yourselves, to practice it with some images yourselves. As I said, you don't have to do homework for this class. You learn a lot more if you do it. And if you have anything to say or ask or to show or to share of what a difference your images made, if you have something like that by the morning of the next week. Okay, so I believe, Thomas, was it you who had tried to speak to or not?
Well, I was just going to say that I tried to do the homework, and it's a lot easier to do it when you're leading us through it all than it is to look at the blank screen and try to do it without you. So I hope you'll guide us through it again of creating an adjustment layer.
Oh, clearly you're going to do adjustment layers every Friday, pretty much. So yeah, no problem. But yes, it is of course at first easier. But the thing is, and this is my goal. My goal isn't that you know how to fix my photos. My goal is that you know how to fix yours. And so baby steps with your own, because then you know how much more to pay attention or what more to register when you're looking at the class. And then people who only do what I do in class is fine. But my goal is to give you the knowledge of all the tools to be able to use them yourselves and then go fly on your own. And if you want to keep checking into the class and learning more, that's great. But definitely the last thing I want is for you to walk out with a great photo of mine, right? Or one of my sample photos And that's it, and to leave it there, right? I want you to not produce good images in class, but to produce good images outside of class, right? So taking it into your class, to your home photos, to your personal photos is the final goal, which is why I'd love you on Friday mornings at the beginning to share if you've done anything you're particularly proud of, or particularly in horror of, because you couldn't know how to fix and you have questions, right? So like both ways. I don't want only just successes. I want, like, I tried this and it didn't work. I tried that, because in fact, those teach you even more than the ones where you did great. All right. Okay, so now you've heard it. I want you to do stuff over the week, to have stuff to share Friday morning. And as I said, I'm going to share with you this little Padlet thing that you guys can post things during the week. But yeah, I want to see stuff. Mainly I want questions about stuff you tried to do that did or didn't work. Ed, your sound is off. I made everyone's sound go off when there was some.
Hello,
talking.
can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
So I was just raising my hand. You said you wanted us to show you things that we've done, and
Mhm.
so.
Sure, something you
But
did.
you were going into what you're doing. So why don't you do that first?
No,
and
no,
then-
no. If you have something to share, please do so, because I haven't shared yet. That's my goal,
Okay.
to have one or two ideas of what I
So
think it inspires people.
as you
too.
know, I don't use Photoshop as my primary product. I use it as a plug-in add-on to things that I do.
Mhm.
Okay. And I was processing a picture from a trip that we were in Arcadia National Park
Mhm,
3 years ago.
mhm.
And if I can figure out how to share my screen.
All right, so it's two steps. First, the green share button. Okay.
I
and
actually
then-
I had to open up the right one. That's the reason.
Oh, okay. After you get the green share button going, then on the far right, perfect, you got the other one. All
Okay.
right.
So this is a fairly heavily processed picture, but the point about Photoshop was if you look at the right-hand one, and you look at the aspect of how close the nose and the tail of the boat are to the
Mhm.
edge, I
Uh-huh.
couldn't really put a frame in there. I was cutting into it.
Mhm,
But on the left-hand side, what I did is I went into Photoshop, did the crop,
mhm,
expanded the crop outside the
mhm,
edges of the picture,
mhm,
and then did content fill aware, and it filled in all of that space in there perfectly.
mhm,
And it's like, I don't think I know any other software that can do that.
mhm.
So,
So guys, here's the deal. There's so many different ways to process photos, and there's certain things that only Photoshop can give you, and that's what Ed's sharing here. So on the right side is the original photo. So there's no air in front of the boat or behind the boat. So with the content aware crop, which we're going to get into, he got more water that wasn't there before. See all the water ahead and behind the boat? Okay, a little bit of a dock, that kind of stuff there. That all happened in Photoshop. So pretty cool, huh? And what a difference it made. And you look at it and it's not like he's faked the photo. He's just maybe gave himself more space than he gave when he actually took the picture. But it's still the same place, the right place. And it made for a for a viewable and enjoyable photo versus the first one it was cramped in. All right. So awesome. Really, really nice share for showing what can be done. Thank you so much. Love that. All right. The thing about Photoshop is that it's getting more and more. It used to be that you had to do everything manually, but it's getting more and more intelligent, and that it's getting really doing things for you, right? And one of those magical things that it does is this thing called content aware. So you just heard him say content aware. I mentioned content aware crop. But there's many tools that have this content aware feature in it. And what it does is when you click on something or you point to something, the computer, the artificial intelligence looks, analyzes, and creates stuff that wasn't there, right? Or fixes or adjusts to what was there. So that's what the content aware tool does, and it's in many different things. He just used it in crop. Okay, so we're going to come up with content to wear in a lot of different places. Awesome, great share. Thank you. Ken, you have your hand up? And your sound is off? Yeah.
Yeah, so my question is, one of our homework assignments was to take some of our own photos and move them into My Drive.
Mhm.
And then, so I've done that, but
That's for
So-
people, by the way, who have VDI. I'm telling
VDI,
everyone
right,
else. Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
So then how do what's the next step? It's in My Drive. and
Okay, so
then-
if it's in your drive, I'll start sharing now Bridge, and before we go to my photos, I'll show you really quickly how to get to yours.
Okay,
okay.
thanks.
I'll do that in a second. All right, perfect. Good question. And I'm gonna share my screen now for Bridge. And I'm already inside of the shared drives, and those of you who are at home should be in whatever folder your class files are in. But the question that Ken is having, I told people to put their own photos available, but you don't have them in the school computer. So I showed them how to put them into their pipeline My Drive. So now the answer to that is, if you go to this PC, then go to Google Drive, which is how we got to our photos, right? But in Google Drive, you had two choices: shared drives, which is where my photos are, which are the class photos, or My Drive, which is where your photos are all you people who are using VDI that I showed you last week how to put your own photos. And some of you left before that because I did it a little bit after time. If you're on VDI and I told you go and do your own photos, the question is, how do you put them in Photoshop? And so I said, you have to put them in your pipeline My Drive. So if you didn't get that point at that part, but you were here, but you left in time, and I did this after time, go watch the ending of last week's recording where I went step by step through this. So anyway, you get to My Drive, you open up, and then in My Drive, you have all the photos that you put in My Drive. I have a ton of stuff in My Drive. So wherever you put them, maybe you made a folder in here, whatever. So this is My Drive, yours is your drive, right? Literally, that My Drive is the person who's reading its drive. Did you find them there, Ken?
Oh, I haven't gone to there. I'm just watching you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah,
So that's where you would do that. Okay.
okay.
Versus shared drives, you find the one that I provided you for school, and then you have to go to the Photoshop shared drive, which is the one that I've given you, and then there you go. Now I wanted to stop here for a minute because I always go straight into the photos, and I just want to let you know that I have a whole bunch of handouts here that some of, many of you have repeated the class a lot of times, about these handouts. I haven't shown them much, but for people who are here for the second time, there's some good stuff in here as far as beginners or primers on how to do some things like this quick guides to Photoshop or optimizing photos or retouching. It's just little steps, handouts that have little steps of how to, some basic things. But also there's some stuff here that I want you to start reading. Since we're at it, I'm going to tell you. So many of you guys have read this already, but if not, this file, the new pixels image size, and I'm gonna you can't see it really big in here, but it's a conversation about pixels, image size, resolution, and whatnot. We're going to be talking about this all along. We're going to begin to talk resolution. We're going to begin to really understand that, but it would be easier if you don't start from zero, like you have some reading. And so that's your homework, okay? To read this handout. I want you to, again, if you've already read it and you already understand it, there's a couple more in here that I want you to read. For example, how to resize images for print, how to resize images for emailing and for the web. So those would be something I want you to read, but I wanted to read those after you've read the new pixels image size, okay? Which is 13 pages. Is relatively long, although there's a lot of images. So sit down, pay a bit of attention when you can, and get some knowledge about what later when I speak about it here, it won't be the first time you've heard it. Okay, so those are handouts that I have. I also have a good shortcuts one that this is the only one I always used to print and bring to school to hand out. Everything else, you know, even because we've been told many years now not to print anymore if necessary. But this one I used to print and have people have near their computers, because knowing how to do shortcuts is really important. And so if you have a chance to print this one yourself, if you're getting accustomed to shortcuts, it gives you some of the beginning sets of shortcuts that we're going to be using. And I'll be, I tell you all the time, do Control C, Command Z, Control A, Control D, Command A, Command D. But if I repeat it, like Thomas said, and then, you know, you're on your own, it's Wednesday and you're like, what was that shortcut? Then that's a good little handout for the most important shortcuts. If you can print that one yourselves, that would be great. All right. There, you know, spend some time with them, but now I'm going to go into the class files. And again, the handouts where they are in the same place you find the, you know, okay, you only went in there once to download the photos if you have it at home. Okay, so you went into Google Drive and Pipeline, SBCC Pipeline, Google Drive, shared drives, Photoshop shared files. So I told you how to do all that the first day. I have a video that tells you how to get in there, and I will send it to you, because that's also how you get to the class recording thing. So let me just make myself a note to email you guys the video about how to get to the handouts and recordings, because they're in the same place. Okay, so I'm going to email you the video of how to get there, so that you then get yourself there every time you need. And then the one that I want you guys to read as a first one ever is called new. So as long as you see the word new, big new, and I kind of left that one there. New pixels, image, size, it's a long name. And image size and image. Oh, it's not resolution in Photoshop. So there, I just wrote the whole name. That's the whole long name of the handout, but really is long. It starts with the word new, and that's the one that I want you to read. Nothing else has the word new in front of it. Okay. All right. Cool. So back into the folder with the photos, and basically have to access the same place where you downloaded the stuff from. So, all right.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
This is Ken again.
Yeah.
So I went into this PC, Google Drive, My Drive. I've got my photos in preview. Now, from there, do I need to move it do I need to move them someplace to work on them?
No. Just like mine are here, if they're in Google Drive, as long as you can view them, you can double click and they'll open in Photoshop. I mean, you are inside of VDI, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So as much
Okay.
as here's a folder we're looking at, which has the photos I'm holding. But
Right.
if you went to a folder that's holding yours in My Drive, maybe I have other photos. Here I have a photo, for example, and it's in My Drive now. If I double click this one, it'll open inside of Photoshop. Okay, so
Okay.
yeah, it's just
Okay.
perfect.
Great.
All right. So it's like in your computer, your photos with Bridge, your photos don't need to be in any particular place. You navigate as if you were navigating your Finder, trying to find where your photos are. And once you find them, you just double click and they open in Photoshop. Okay. So
Okay.
Bridge is not, this is important. Your question brings me to explain Bridge is not a place where you have to place photos in a particular place. The photos stay wherever they are. It's about you understanding hand file management and knowing how to get to them, right? Where did you put your photos in your computer? Which is, I just showed you where are they? They are in Google Drive, but for other people, they are in pictures, documents, wherever you save your photos. You just navigate to that spot and then you open up. So last week we opened this photograph and it's a JPEG, right? A JPEG is a file that is flat and that has been processed by the camera already. And this is the part I didn't talk about last week much, the difference between a JPEG and a RAW file. So I'm going to just spend not a humongous amount of time on that, but just a little bit of time to explain that when you take a picture with anything, any kind of camera, be it a big old DSLR with gazillions of lenses, or be it your phone, by default, it'll give you a JPEG file. And if a camera is capable of shooting RAW, you would have to set it up to give you RAW, or to give you RAW and JPEG. Some people take the same image in both modes every time they shoot. The whole point is that the JPEG is the basic file that comes out of cameras. And when your camera clicks and records the image, it doesn't leave it as it sees it. That would be a RAW file, right? But then these files are really big, full of information. Most cameras process that photo to make it smaller, to make it better, in fact, and then save it as a JPEG, which is a compressed file format. So a file that's compressed will lose some quality. It will lose some details that the original image captured, but in order to get, if you want more per card, so to make the file size much smaller, the solution is to get it compressed. And so JPEG not only takes away file size, but it also gets rid of some of that information that you still have available in the RAW files. Now, it also gives it some focus, some sharpening. It also gives it maybe some color correction, some color balance. I mean, it does stuff to it. Each camera does to it based on its program. And Canon and Sony and Panasonic and Olympus, they all have their own little way. So if you take the same moment with 2 or 3 or 5 different cameras, that JPEG will look a little bit different. Different models of phones will look a little bit different, because each camera will do its own post-processing of their own. And if instead you take a RAW picture, the photo will look a little bit blur because it'll have no post-processing. And then you have all the information the camera captured available for yourself to be able to bring out richer colors, richer tones. Remember the photo that Ed just showed us, there's just so much, did you see that glow, the colors, that thing? That probably wasn't there. It would be interesting, people who have processed their photos in RAW, to see what really the photo had and what you did to make it look the way it is. So actually, what Ed showed us, he had already processed in RAW. So the photo that didn't have the tips and boats, it was already processed in RAW. He'd already made it look really good. And then he added the space in front and behind. But that wasn't the thing that the camera saw. The camera and the photo he saw when he started was probably a much more flat, less, interesting visually. And then he gave it all that oomph in RAW. And then he added that little space in Photoshop. So those are all the things that you can do. And with RAW, you have much more leeway in your tones, particularly at the ends, at the broad ends, blacks and whites and stuff like that. You just have much more information. But you have to process a RAW picture in Photoshop or in something to make it be much more attractive or correct. Versus a JPEG, many times the camera's processing is enough to just have it and print it and be there for the general people, right? So yeah, so that's why we want to try to shoot RAW. If you are working on a photo that you want to really have in your life, maybe a print, or to, if you're going to sell it, of course, if you're going to share it online and stuff like that. But you don't want to shoot every single thing you shoot in RAW. You don't want to go to your friend's house at a party and have some gathering and shoot everything in RAW, because then all those pictures are huge and you'll have to just really process them. So it's not like everything should be RAW, but photos are supposed to, that you go out on a walk with your camera to take some gorgeous pictures, shoot RAW, right? And then we'll show, you can check, even you can shoot RAW on your phones, you can shoot RAW in almost definitely any DSLR that you buy, and you can shoot RAW in so many of the point and shoot cameras that you would be able to buy now that aren't really, really basic. You can also shoot RAW. Okay, so yeah, Ken, your hand is still up. Is it the same question from before, or is it a new question? All right, it was the old question. Okay, Liz. Hello, I can't hear you. Oh. I heard you for a second and then I didn't hear you. I think it's your headsets or your cable or.
Can you hear me now?
There, now I can hear you. Yeah.
All right, my headset's something. Okay, so my question is two questions. One
Mhm.
is how can you get RAW on your phone? Well, how do you do that?
Yeah, so you have to, there's different apps that you can use to do RAW on your phone. I won't answer that right now, but
Okay.
because for better or for worse, this is about the output, not the input. I'll get around, hang out during break or after class and I'll tell you. Okay.
Sure. And then the other thing is, so when I clicked on that shortcut page and I absolutely can't get out of it. I can't see Photoshop. I rebooted the computer already. And so I'm not really sure.
The shortcuts page, what are you talking about? Oh, the handouts. Oh, you
Yeah.
opened the handouts and you're in VDI?
I am in VDI and I opened one of the handouts and it will not close. I'm
Right.
reconnecting.
So you went here to a handout. No, you don't need to find it. So you went from the shortcut and you did like that and you opened it.
Yeah.
So it should have opened in PDF or something like that in a PDF viewer. And from Bridge, you probably, so here, so if it opens up like that, what it did is opened the computer, the PC opened Adobe Acrobat or something like that. Yeah, Adobe Acrobat to see it. So you just have 3 programs opened right now. Okay.
So I can't.
So you can, hold on. So you can close that program. It's the first time I do it, and so it's asking me a ton of stuff. Let me just cancel. I'll cancel. I don't know.
So I don't actually have access to the student desktop right now. The only thing that's on it, but it doesn't give me, like, I can't see the blue screen. I don't have any access to the menu.
Hold on. So this is what should have happened, and then I'll help you share your screen to see what happened. But Photoshop and Bridge are still there, but a new program opened to show me the handouts, right? Which is Acrobat. So now I'm going to close it again, and then that would have left you back in there. But I'm going to stop because let me see what it is that happened. So share your screen. By the way, when I said about the iPhone, depends on what model phone you have. If you have, while she's doing that, while she's sharing her screen, if you have a phone that's, I believe above 8, maybe a 10, then you can, within the regular camera of the phone, you can shoot RAW. Same with Android phones, but the older ones, you need another app. Okay, so you have, so, oh, because you're on a Chromebook. You always need to remind me you're on a Chromebook, because what you see is your computer works differently. Got it. So see down at the bottom of your screen, you have those 4 little guys. The one on the far right is your student desktop. So click on that one. Click on that one. Okay, and now double click on student desktop. And that should send you back. You should close this one first. I don't go up to the top right and close that one. Yeah. And now double click And it's loading in and it should take you back into the right place.
Thank you.
Let's see. Well, Chromebooks and sharing.
Right back
Okay.
into it.
Close that again. You might need to start.
I did. I restarted it already.
Well, from the very beginning. Wow. I don't know what I don't understand. You know what? You might even need to completely, yeah, this is not going to work. You might need to completely cancel out of the
Okay.
class and sign in again. Like actually, because I'm not sure, instead of just doing this, try this one more time, but if not, just sign out of the class. But you know, close everything out, do a whole sign out, and then open the link again and get into the class again to completely. So what I'm seeing up there, wait, what I'm seeing at top, hold on. Go to the far right of all your tabs, right? Not that, no, go back, that one, click on that one. Try clicking on it from there.
It's in it. You just can't see it on this screen, but on the Chromebook, it has the top bar. See, this is the bar. So that's in the page. And then click, you mean double click from here?
Yeah, this desktop from there. You have too many, all those tabs you have open on a Chromebook is gonna kill it. I would
Yeah,
close them all. Yeah, so close everything, close every single thing you have open, every single one of those and start again, because that's driving it. Just close not what you just did, which then opens
each
up with
one?
all the tabs open. Close each tab one by one, like
Okay.
close every tab. Like don't have all those tabs available because it's just not gonna, it just, yeah, that doesn't.
Yeah, they just happened while I was trying to fix it, but
Yeah.
no, that's okay. I'll mess
All
with
right.
it and start. I'll watch. the
Yeah,
class.
close all your tabs, close everything that's available, go back if necessary, sign out of the class and sign in again, is clean it up again. Okay, to reconnect, and I'll let you in
Okay.
again
Thank you.
if necessary. But yeah, all that open stuff on a Chromebook is just doesn't have the power to keep that going. All right, so here we go. So last week we opened a JPEG, is what I was beginning to say, and that means it's a camera. It's a photo that's already been processed by the camera, even if it's the first time you see it, right? It's taken some, added some, taken some away. And when you do that, when you open a JPEG just by double clicking, and I'm going to do that right now, you don't have to do that to this one, it's just reminding you. What does it do? It opens it straight in Photoshop, right? So now there we go. It opened in Photoshop, it's a JPEG, it's a flat file, okay? That's what happens to a JPEG. Now, if instead, I'm going to go back to Bridge. If instead I had wanted to process this JPEG or any JPEG directly in RAW first, but let me go back to Photoshop 1 second. So then in here, just as a reminder of the steps, from in here, what we did last week is we went up to filters and we did the camera raw filter. Remember? Well, first we turned it into convert for smart filters, and then we did camera raw filter. So basically we accessed camera raw from inside of Photoshop. We had also put some layers and some adjustment layers and stuff. So that's the process from last week. This time, instead, we're going to go ahead and open a JPEG again. I'm going to just go with a JPEG today, or to start with. So, which is a photo that all of you guys have. Every single one of you guys has a JPEG. Before I used to show RAW with RAW pictures, and a lot of people felt like it wasn't for them. But yes, every single one of you has a JPEG. Okay, so we're going to go to let me see, which one was it that I hit? Where is it? It's up at type. Notice that there's a TIFF over here. There's a JPEG TIFF and a PSD. We have a lot of, so the only ones we cannot open in RAW right now would be a PSD. So it's a PSD. It's not openable in RAW. You can inside of RAW use it. But anyway, so I'm looking for one. I was going to show something else, but I wanted to show what Ed just showed us. And I'm looking to see if one of ours works for that. I was just trying to see if one of ours worked for what Ed just showed, but I don't think so. Anyway, let's go ahead and go to this lady. It's just called Retouch. Okay. We're gonna go to this one here. And by the way, I have a couple of different raw files here. Let me put my spotlight so that you can distinguish what's a raw versus not a raw. Because as much as JPEG and PSD are two very clear extensions, the ones for raw changed according to the type of camera you have. So this one here, reflection sunset arch .cr2, that's a raw from a Canon camera. I'm noticing I don't have any NEFs here today. So I put different RAWs here each time. If you had an .NEF, that would be from a Nikon camera. Now then you have this here that's .dng, right? Digital negative. So this is a raw picture that was taken either by an iPhone, which this one wasn't, or it's already been processed and turned into a DNG. It's the Adobe extension for DNG. There's an actual difference in what it's CR2 or a Nikon or an Olympus versus what a DNG will do, and not talk about it too much right now because one is two files, one is one file. All I'm going to say is a DNG is an Adobe version of Camera Raw. Okay, so those are all like raw files. Okay, in case someone the other day clicked on one to see it and then said, oh, I'm in raw inadvertently, because that will take you straight into raw. Okay, go back to this JPEG. Now, if I were to double click like I did with that guy, it would just open in Photoshop because the JPEG opens in Photoshop, right? So to open it directly in raw, I have to right click. And then through all my choices, up here, I see open in Camera Raw. Now I'm saying up there, but if I had been scrolled in such a way that this is much higher, like say this was bigger and it was higher up on screen, when I right click, then open in Camera Raw would be down there. Okay, so depending on what position your photo is on the screen, where you'll have to scroll up or down to find open in Camera Raw. This confuses some people, so I just wanted to show that here. So now go ahead and say open in Camera Raw. Yes, Dorothy, you have a question? I can't hear you yet. I still can't hear you. Your sound is muted. Your sound is still muted. There.
Okay.
Okay.
When we went to took that picture of your son and went to Camera Raw, we did the 2 steps of going to convert to smart filters and then
Yeah.
to Camera Raw.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any reason why you have to do that if Camera Raw filter is down below?
It's 2 different ways of using Camera Raw. So for now, let's just not compare them. The tool is the same one, but it's 2 different ways. So in this way, it's just one more tool of the many Photoshop gives you. Camera Raw, adjustment layers, there's all many different ways of adjusting a photo. When I used it the way we used it last week. And I guess I should have opened the process one so you could see. Here, let me just really quickly, I'm gonna convert from Camera Raw. Give me a second here. I'm gonna do a Camera Raw filter. I'm going to do something really quickly just so you can see visually what's happening. So say that I change the contrast. I'm going to do that really quickly. I want to do something that's very obvious here, so you can really see it happening. I'm going to make something that will visually be very different. There we go. So now I did something that made it look really blue. That is a filter that I can turn on and off. Okay, so that I just did is something that's easy to turn on and off. And we also did some adjustment layers. I'm going to just do a quick adjustment layer of some bizarre kind too, which is making it pink. And now that is a filter that affects my photo in one way or another. So these are all filters affecting the original photo, right? That, okay? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. I'll leave it here as a sample, because now when we actually do the camera open in Camera Raw directly in Camera Raw, you'll see that when we take this photo into Photoshop, it's going to be different than what we just did. Okay, so now follow these steps with me, and then at the end, you'll be able to see what the difference is. Okay,
Okay, thanks.
so hang out. It's just using the same tool in a different way with different results. So anyway, here I am. I have this guy in Camera Raw. Last time I had problems making it big, so this time I'm going to make it big by hand, because when I made it big with the full screen last week, I lost access to it, which was very unfortunate. There we go. Just gonna do it that way. Okay, so you want to try to make it as big as you can, because you want to see your image as big as you can. Okay, so I'm just grabbing the ends. Normally I would have clicked on that, but last week when I did that, it took me like 5 minutes to get back to it because it went off screen. So I don't want to even try that. So now I just hand expanded it. So here we have an image that's a JPEG, and it still is a JPEG. Okay, and we open it through in order to use these tools before we head into Photoshop. So now there's a lot we can do with this image. There's not much we need right now with this whole area taken up by this bar. This is good when you have many images open at the same time, and you can have say you took 8 photos of this woman, and you process one, and then you translate that processing to all the other 8, right? So it's really good when you have many images of the same moment, where the same adjustments would apply, same lighting, same everything. But if you have 2 photos very differently, then it wouldn't help, right? But right now we only have one, so we don't need to see this. So we can just, how did we do? So see this hand right there, my mouse, I can put my mouse right in the corner there, and then just kind of drag it down or make it smaller, just so that I see her using my screen better. Especially some of you have small screens. If you have a big screen, you're fine. You can use all the space
Diane,
that you want. Yeah, there's a button to make it up or down.
If you click on that little square with a caret,
This guy?
it does it too automatically.
This one?
No, on the left-hand side. Right by the one just to the left of the bars. Click on that.
There we go. I knew it was one of those buttons, but I can't remember which one it was. There you go. That one. That turns it on and off. Cool. Thank you. So here we have this image that last week I kind of began to show you some of these sliders. One of the things is that a lot of people who don't really understand yet much about photography, they just want to quickly figure out how this photo can be fixed. Well, one of the things that you can try when you're beginning to use RAW is figure out if Photoshop maybe knows better than you. And let me just say that it's depends on the photo. Sometimes Photoshop does an amazing job. Sometimes it does a horrible job. So this is not to say that you can do this and not learn. But if you have no idea where to start, see the very top selection here is the auto button. So you can just go ahead and say, well, let's see what Photoshop thinks, right? And click on the auto button, and something will happen, and you will like it or you will hate it. Now, all these little blue lines, remember what they are? These little blue things that are popping in. Does anyone
Clipping.
remember what this means?
Clipping.
Yeah, and does someone remember what clipping means other than Ed?
It blows it out,
Little
or it takes all the
pixels.
detail.
It means that it's without detail, and since it's the blue one, it means that it's black without detail, like it's gone really not blown out, but actually flat black, right? Just no detail in the blacks. Okay, and that's because I had these turned on from last week. So if you, when you clicked on the auto, did not get anything blue, it's possible that these are turned off. So remember, we turn them on and off just by clicking on them. So if I clicked on it now, see how the blue is gone? Doesn't mean that the photo doesn't have black without details. It's just that Photoshop isn't showing it to me in any way. Okay. Now, on the other hand, if I go over here to the right side of my histogram, do you see any any kind of line reaching to the end of whites? Does it look like we have any whites in here?
No.
It would seem like, you know, the green tones get all the way to the right, but it doesn't seem like we really have that much, but certainly we don't have any clipping in there. So that might mean that we have maybe some space to lighten this photo a little bit more in the highlights or in the whites or something, because we haven't really gotten to the point of clipping. Anyway, right now, I just was trying to review a little bit the whole conversation about the histogram that we worked on last week. But anyway, so now if we want to see the before and after, we just do auto, 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 right? So you turn it on and off. What do you guys think about this thing, this fixing that Photoshop did?
Awful.
Well, better or worse?
Better.
Yeah, but
Brighter,
brighter, it did something, but
brighter, but not necessarily better.
not necessarily better. Yeah, just different, right? Could be better, could be worse. It's a step in a certain direction. So you can use it as a beginning and then work from there, or you can go, I can do better and turn it off and work it on your own. Okay. But you always want to check it. Sometimes it's marvelous. It's like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted. And other times it's like, yeah, it points me to into a good place. Right. But it's good to know it's there. The other quick button that you have here is the black and white. Click on black and white and it sends you into a quick black and white. Not a good one, not a good black and white, but a quick black and white. Okay. You can still work on it immensely from here, but just wanted to show you that. Okay. Now, I personally wouldn't work on black and white from there, but if you know you wanted a black and white, you just put it in black and white and then you work all of your, you know, sliders and stuff to make it better. So anyway, let's leave it without any of these and let's start working on it on our own. But what we're going to do here is look a little bit at the white balance. This is the one place where there's a limitation. If we had a raw picture in here, we would click here on where it says white balance and there'd be a whole bunch of choices for us. Okay. That's one of the places where there's a difference in processing a raw picture or processing a JPEG. Now, the main difference, as I've already told you, is that the JPEG has less leeway to be fixed than a raw. So we're already starting with the fact that it's like starting with a, you know, I'm not trying to be disparaging, but like, you know how sometimes you buy a tomato that's delicious and sometimes you buy one that tastes like water? You're already made, that salad won't turn out as well just because that original ingredient isn't as good, right? So it's the raw image will have more possibility to make a better salad than will the JPEG ingredient, right? That's really it. So you're already starting in a way with an image that has some limitations, but beyond that, raw gives you a limitation in here, and that for presets, it gives you less options. So one of the presets it's giving you is as shot, which is the one that comes up automatically. And then you have the one where you can go, well, let me see what Photoshop thinks of this one, which is auto is always what the Photoshop artificial intelligence thinks, which is auto. And this is what Photoshop thinks is more correct. So when you look at this one here, you can see that it's very yellow, very warm. Okay. If you look at this, these two settings are at 0. When you go to what Photoshop thinks might be a good way to fix it, it has a much more bluish cast, right? Blue and green. And if you look here at the numbers over here, we used to be at 0 and 0. And now this little triangle has moved to the left, meaning everything that was, look at the slider. It goes from yellow to blue. So we went, and I move it by hand now, from this, which was very yellow, to blue. So as we move this to the left, it gets really, really blue. As we move it to the right, it gets really, really yellow. Okay, so this slider changes the whole, it's not color, it's really the light of the moment. I'm going to double click on both of them again to send them back to 0, or let's go back to as shot, which is back to 0. The color temperature is going to be dealt by this top slider and the tint by the bottom one. Color temperature is going to fluctuate between yellow and blue. What happens is that light has a temperature, right? And light, depending on the temperature, and it's measured in Kelvin in degrees. So depending on what temperature that light has, it's going to be bluer or yellower. So when you have a raw file, we're going to open a raw file later and you'll see it. It shows you different stages of possible yellow to blue, like cloudy day or shade or, you know, fluorescent lights, or there's just each kind of light bulb puts out a different kind of light. Plus the sky, when there's no clouds, is very blue, right? Well, guess what? That reflects a lot of blue on us. When the sky is cloudy and shady, we get a ton more of that blue. Sunset light, you guys know, is very yellow. So with this, what you're trying to do is counteract all those casts, or sometimes you want to purposely make something look warmer than colder, and just move it around until it looks as neutral as possible. Ideally, we'll try to get to neutral. So if you're not sure where this should go, sometimes you want to try auto and then go, I like or I don't like what I'm seeing. So now ignore the background, all the stuff that doesn't really matter, and just look at skin tones from what the as shot had to what the auto has, right? So if you could just isolate the rest and just look at skin tones, which you might want to, you maybe can do by getting in a little bit closer. So say that you move up into something much bigger so that you can actually isolate just the skin. And remember last week I showed you how to go back to 100 or 200 or whatever. So if you can just isolate the skin to just not get so much background in there, then move this around. And of course, we don't know this woman. We don't know if she was tanned or if she was not tanned, but you can get an idea that this is probably definitely not good and this is not good. So try yourself to figure out what you think the setting might be. Now, let me do a big disclaimer here. And that's the fact that you and I, every single one in this room has a different monitor. And your monitor is going to be showing you colors differently than it is showing them to me. So if you're serious about, you know, printing for exhibitions or for sale or for stuff like that, you really need to have a way to calibrate your screen. So an example here, I have a little, can you see it in the blur? Yeah, there it is in my little photo I'm showing you, a color calibration unit. What a monitor calibration, I'm sorry. So that is something that you place on your monitor, you run a software, it reads stuff, and it helps you calibrate your screen. Then you can get much more technical with it, but at the very least, it gets you a bit closer. If your monitor is older, it starts changing colors. If it's one brand or another, I always say go to any TV store and look at 10 different TVs and each one shows color their own way, right? So you try to get it to be as neutral as possible. Within that, then you try to fix your photo. Now, when you print this, you might still get something that comes back looking like that or like that because your monitor was off, right? And you fixed it to look really good for your monitor, but in the end, it wasn't. So if every time you print a photo, the colors look really off, then you definitely need to calibrate your screen. Okay. And it's not about just getting a new monitor because every monitor will still need to be calibrated, but a really old monitor definitely loses its color correction faster. So to the best of your ability and with your screen the way you're seeing it, you can move it around until you find a spot that you think is the most neutral. this is one where it's hard to do the before and after, because when you do the before and after, you're always comparing. And the way I see it is comparing is no good. You're only going to see the final image. You, whoever you show this picture, will be only seeing the final image. So try to get yourself adjusted to the final image and not necessarily always going back to what it used to look like, which would be if we do, you know, if we keep going back and forth to as shot, then you're looking at that. And then when you do like that, it definitely looks bad at first. So just try to get yourself a spot where you think it might be good. Find that place, look away for a while, come back to it, and then see it again. And then you can see things a bit better than when you're just going back and forth. Yes, Rashmi? Your sound,
Yeah. So now the question is, what if I want to change change a setting only to a certain part of the photograph, not to the whole?
then you need to be inside of Photoshop.
Okay.
RAW lets you, now RAW, here in RAW, you can do areas, right? Like you can decide to just lighten the sky or the ground or something like that. But when you want to be specific, like you want to just change the color of her eyes, you need to do a really good mask. For that, you need Photoshop. Okay. So in RAW, you can do areas, but there's no tight demarcation line. So when you want to be specific, you want to give her a different color lipstick. You want to give her different color eyes. You want to change the color of her hair. For that, you need to be inside of Photoshop, and we're going to be working with that. We're going to be doing masking, and that's a big part of this course, to learn how to mask correctly. Okay. But if you just want to say in general, lighten something, or in general, darken something, then you're fine. Now, the latest versions of RAW are allowing for masking. So they're getting there's some masking beginning to be a bit more prominent, but it's still nowhere near as detailed as you could get in Photoshop. Okay, so all right, so if y'all found a spot, you'll find that sometimes what happens is that whatever spot you found for the color of skin that you liked or not, when you actually start making the exposure correct, darker or lighter, you might still want to come and fool around with this a bit more. So as you change different things, you might always need to go review the first one that you did, you know what I mean? But let's assume that you like whatever we just set. There's the reason I'm saying is that there's two other choices here, which are the tint, which is green, from adding green or adding magenta. And magenta and green are things that we call color casts, which would be, it's not about the light. Well, it is about the light. Like for example, fluorescent light, you shoot something under fluorescent, it tends to be very green. There's a lot of other reasons why you might have different color changes. But if you think something is a bit too red, you might move it into the green. If it's a bit too green, you move it into the red. So in this case, might be a little bit red here. Let me move a little bit into the green. And then you look at a skin and you go, oh, she's looking like she's beginning to die over here or something. So, I guess I didn't want to put so much green in her. And if you go over into the red, you go, that's just a bit too pinkish. She's had a bit too much to drink. So anyway, when you make corrections in color cast or in temperature, usually we're talking little tiny minute changes. Unless the photo is, a real problem, we're really gonna go really far, right? So a lot of these, you need to get your eye trained to it a little bit more before you can begin to do anything much to this, and you're slowly begin to get more accustomed to this. So just set it wherever you feel comfortable with and see if that works. Back out a little bit, and then hopefully you have it as neutral as you can for now and for what your eyes are telling you. And again, these settings might work for me, but when you put these settings on your computer, it might not look very good on yours, depending on what your skin, I actually calibrated, since I told you I just reset my entire computer. I had a computer that was completely reinstalled, a clean install of everything. And so I just calibrated my computer. Sure. You know what? Dorothy's asking me to send a list, and you know what, Dorothy, send me an email, because I'll probably forget to do it as just a request in the chat. I'm going to put it down here in my list, but send me an email too, because that triggers my memory a little bit more. Okay, so now this thing is this I like it better than when I started. And notice that when I moved these by hand, it turned into custom, and that's all it is, that you've made your own choices. So then it goes into custom. There's some tools for color calibration. I'm not going to show you that too much because right now at this point, I think the best you can do is just make it look as good as you can. We'll talk later about what's neutral and neutral gray and stuff like that. Right now, most importantly, until you get this a bit better exposure wise, it'll be even hard to tell the color. So let's work with exposure a little bit, because I don't know about you guys, but clearly it seems to me that her face is too dark, right? So now we already talked about these in the class last week about how to work on some of these. And the main thing I want to remind you is that the first two apply to the entire image. So say that I were to work to darken the exposure, everything gets darker. Say I were to lighten it, everything gets lighter. And sometimes you need to do that. It truly was too dark or too light, right? Most of the times, if it's really, really a wrong exposure, this works. And this might be one of those cases where everything really seems to look a little bit too dark to me. But if not, you want to avoid that, and you want to go into just lightening one thing, darkening another thing. Contrast works is the same. Contrast makes lights lighter and darks darker. So if I move the contrast to the right, or if I move the contacts to the left, I have less control over all the different creatures. So for the most part, unless it's really necessary, I leave the contrast kind of let it lie. And I work with the individual parts of what would give it to be more contrast or dark. Now, in this case, I do believe that actually exposure is off and that everything could benefit from having the exposure brought up. And so I'm going to just work a little bit on that and lighten this. Now, remember what I said at the beginning of last week, that what your computer monitor brightness settings are set at really make a difference, because if your monitor is really bright, you might see her already looking lighter than if your monitor is really dark. So I've told you that a good setting, a good generic setting would be at the very least to start with your monitor at mid brightness, so that at least your eyes are not getting, encandilado, say in Spanish. I don't know if there's a word for that, when your eyes, it's so bright that you're kind of, there's a word for it. You walk into the sun and you're suddenly can't see. What's the name? I don't know. We have a word in Spanish. Is there a word in English for that? To have your eyes just shined out or something like that. Anyway, a big bright monitor will do that. Okay.
You squint.
What's that?
You squint.
I guess you squint. That's what your body does. Anyway, we have a word for what your eyes feel like when you get bright eyes and you're like, never mind. So again, if I put my exposure, for some of you guys who have a very bright screen, this exposure might seem like it's looking good. But if not, you don't. So again, a lot of this is very subjective. And so until you begin to print your photos and then begin to compare your prints to your monitors, you won't really be able to get a gauge on what's completely correct. Does that make sense? So if you print this photo and she looks ridiculously dark, ridiculously bright in comparison to what you see, then you'll begin to see that you need to adjust your own material. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and give this quite a bit of brightness. I think it was pretty dark. So I moved the exposure quite a bit. And then after that, I'm going to start seeing if I can make things a little bit better over here. Now, at this point, if you want to start comparing before and after, you could click here to one time here to where you started and one time here. And so at this point, we've only moved two things, that and that, well, three things. And I'm thinking it's already quite a bit better, right? And I personally think it's quite a bit better than that auto that the computer gave me, which you might not remember right now, but none of us really liked it, did we? So how's it going for you guys? Oh, God, I've got a message. I'm sorry, I'm getting something that keeps binging at me. Okay. Oh, someone was in the waiting room. That's what it was. I had a little dinging at me, and it was reminding me someone was in the waiting room. Okay. All right. So now I'm personally still seeing a lot of red. Her face looks really ruddy and red. So you might want to just see at this point whether you want to move a little bit more over here to towards the green. So anyway, we'll play around with it a little bit. But the thing is that a lot of the details of this we can then fix in Photoshop, and that's the thing. That's what I was saying when someone asked me the difference. I can go in and just work on her wrinkles, on the spots on her face and all of that. But to do that, I'll have to do that inside of Photoshop. Let me see. We'll play a little bit. At this point, I want you guys to play on your own, not to look at what I'm doing. Just disconnect your eyes from mine and just try to see what you would do to her face, and then look at my screen again. Just try for yourself. Okay. That's great. Hi, Carol. All right, so I'm going to play a little bit now myself to see what happens if and sometimes the best thing you can do is to move something way over to one side and then way over to the other side, just to see what the effects of this slider does to your image, like when you're learning, and then just go, oh, I like this better, I like that better, but just to even see what places it affects, and also to keep an eye on what's happening to your histogram when you do that, and to make sure you're not clipping or you are clipping, and then you bring it back to the middle, you try the next one. Then when you have an idea of what each one of the sliders does to your photo, then you combine them and you go, okay, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, kind of like cooking. So I've looked at what the highlights does. I go over there and I go, oh, this seems to be affecting the background the most, right? Yeah, because in her face, the only other real big changes with this one is maybe inside of her eye a little bit, but mainly it seems to be affecting the background, and I like that the background is getting, brighter. All right, so I'm gonna leave it there, and if I go dark, yeah, looks like she doesn't have any highlights in her face because it's affecting a little bit her face, but mainly the background. So then I'm gonna move the shadows, and I'm gonna go the shadows to the right and the shadows to the left. And I'm seeing her hair is changing tremendously. If I go all the way to the right or all the way to the left, the inside of her eyes, like this whole area, is changing a lot when I get really dark or really light. Okay. And then the rest of it, there's some change in her clothes, which is not important. Okay. So now I have an idea of what that one does. Bring it back to the middle. If you're way over here and you bring it back to the middle, you can do a double click. Okay. So you can double click everything to bring everything back to the middle. Then we go to the whites, and then you move the whites to the right. All right, big change. There's a lot of whites in her face. Okay, there's a lot of whites in her face. So this one is really making a difference. So then what the whites versus the highlights, remember up here, if you put your mouse, you can remember whites are the very light colors, and highlights. So whites are the lightest of the brights, and then highlights are the light grays. Okay. So the whites seem to be affecting her face a lot. And so if I move to the right, I get to the place pretty quickly where I'm getting all the background immediately starts clipping. See how there's this red starts creeping into the background, starts getting clipped. And if I go even further, then her cheeks and her forehead, all that shiny stuff gets to the limit. So I might want to pull this up until for sure I don't get any clipping, but also maybe we don't want these big, like splotchy lights on her face. On her, she looks all shiny. So you might work on it a little bit and then decide what, is a bit. By the way, I left it at this zoomed in mode. I just want to say that usually the best way to edit something is at 100%, but this photo is too small to give us, very good view of what's happening at 100%. On a retina monitor, you can always do 200% and it's still really good. So anything bigger than 200% it's going to start to get pixelated, which is happening with this face. So your skin looks kind of weird, but since we're just looking at tones right now, it's fine to have it look a little bit pixelated. So anyway, just put this number at whatever makes it look best. Now, if you were to look at details, you couldn't be doing it at 300%, but just to look at colors and tones, you can do that. All right, so I'm kind of like lightening her face a little bit more. I'm liking the effect of that. So I'm going to leave that over there. Oh, I haven't played with the whites yet, the blacks, I'm sorry. So then I'll go and move my blacks to the right and my blacks to the left. And I've got a lot of blacks in her hair and her eyes and stuff like that. And so if I were to darken some of that a little bit, we would get some more contrast. But in general, I think the blacks are kind of okay where they are. So the thing that I thought I'd do more is add a little bit more brightness to her face. I like the idea of a lighter background, so I'm going to move the highlights to the right. Maybe I'm going to darken the shadows a little bit to give it a little bit more contrast. Yeah, I'm wondering if this might be a good starting point. I'm still seeing a lot of red, but we're going to move into that. We're going to fix things in Photoshop. Texture, skin texture, stuff like that in Photoshop that you cannot do in RAW. So I don't know. Let me try from before and after. Maybe not so much, not so many whites. I don't like all that shine that I brought into her face. Maybe a little bit more on the exposure. No, it's overexposed now. Anyway, so you see, it's a lot of it is just what you think makes things look better. I think she looks too red, but it didn't get fixed by moving the green over. So that's the kind of stuff that we can work with in Photoshop. Because we need to get more specific on the areas that I think that I think are too red. Now, for the next set of sliders, we for sure need to be at 100%. I'm going to put mine at 200% because I do have a retina screen, so I can get away with it. But these next set of sliders do have to do with sharpness and focus and texture, clarity. You really need to see this at the best resolution for your screen. And so when mine says 100% is this big, for you, depending on your screen resolution, 100 to 200% might make even smaller or even bigger. It depends. Okay. So before I move on to the other sets of sliders, any questions yet? Anything you want to say about yours, not yours? Let me remind you how this is a quick default, like all the way to the beginning and to the end. But if you go here to this little box, the one that's right next to it, when you click on that, you can do a comparison of before and after. Okay, like that. And as you,
sorry, what did you just click on?
okay, so to the, now it doesn't look like, let me just go back to how it needs to, I'm trying to make it go back to the, here. So I've been clicking on this one here, which is toggle the default settings back and forth, how we started to how we are now, right? But right to the left of it, you see one little box that the moment you,
I can't see where your mouse is. Could you tell me? Okay,
all right, so here's my mouse. I'm going way down here to the bottom corner.
Oh, it's just off screen on the Zoom. Okay.
Oh, got it.
Okay. I know where to look on my screen now. That's okay.
Does anyone else see it? Not see it? Is it off screen for all you guys? No. Right.
No, we can see it.
You can see it. Okay, so right next, there's this little black and white box that shows you the default and back. To the left, there's a little square, but once you click on it once, it expands itself. And that's why it doesn't look like a little square anymore. And that's why if you've already clicked, you won't find that square anymore, because it toggles a couple of different choices before and after. Oh, I had left this in the before, after, and then it gives you the half and half of the same thing, or top and bottom, or half and half sideways, depending on the image you have. Now, as I said, it helps to have a before and after, but it doesn't necessarily, when you finish the 5 choices, then it goes back into this little box. It doesn't always necessarily help to do that because, as I said, this is the photo you'll be seeing at the end. So you need to begin to, at some point, just look at what you have now. All right. My alarm has been telling me for a while that it's time for a break. What time is it? Yeah, 10:30. So any questions about where we are up until now before we move into break time? Rashmi, I see a hand. Is that from before? Okay. Is it a new hand? The question?
Yes. So I understand that the adjustments that we make are per what we want it to look like, but is there a standard set of guidelines that what a good picture is? Because I mean, I'm doing the same things that you're doing. Of course, it looks a little different than mine, but also I may want it a little differently. And you are seeing things that I obviously, because you know so much, that I'm not even watching out for. So is there a certain standard set of guidelines that I can say, okay, if my picture is like that, this is sort of things that I need to watch out
Yeah.
for it to be a good photograph?
It's a hard answer. There are as many answers to that probably as there are photographers in the world. And yet, you know, I was trained at Brooks where there is this thing considered what's correct, like what's a correct exposure, what's a correct thing. And I trained in color printing, and I had all these filters that you look at an image and you put these filters in front and gels and you go, oh, this needs a bit more of that. You move it, you add red, you add yellow, you add blue, right, whatever. And even then, one thing I want to say in the end, it's still subjective. Now, you guys aren't professionals yet. I mean, some of you might decide to do this professionally, but you can take every color correction class in the world, and depending on who teaches it, they'll have their own formula. It's like, what's the right carrot cake, right? What's the correct way to bake your turkey, right? I mean, so I'm being a little bit flippant here, but there's a place where you look at a photo process, the same photo processed by 5 different photographers, and each one of them will leave it in the end different. Professional photographers, right? One will prefer a moody, urban, chic look. Another one will prefer as neutral as possible, clean, straight. Another one will prefer to make this look hazy and romantic and high key. And it's an art. Post-production is still part of the art of photography, right? And every photographer since the time of negatives, you know, Ansel Adams, if you see the straight negative that he used to photograph, it's very different than what ended up coming out of, after hours of processing in the lab, his black and white negatives, then they're masterpieces. And another person would have made the same photo look different. So there is no one way that's right. That said, there are certain things that are neutral when it comes to tone, so that you don't have a color cast. That's the worst of it, to have something look very green, very red. So you need to try to train yourself to find what's neutral. But that's something that you'll get with training, with looking at stuff and comparing the behind, the back and forth. You'll get that by printing your images with 3 different settings. And then when you get them in hand, you look at them and you go, oh, definitely this one looks better than that. You know what I mean? So it's practice, practice, practice. There are very few things that are for sure. Like when you're doing jobs for printing, you want to make sure that your white doesn't get below 10%, because then it'll go black. There's rules like that. But other than those steadfast rules, Anne is saying something that makes sense. I have one. I don't have one next to me. I don't have my camera bag next to me, but she said something about, what about shooting with a gray card? If you look at the chat, if you have, if you're just shooting things and then you go, oh, this was beautiful, I want to print it nicely, you won't have a gray card around you. But if you're going to do a professional photo shoot, you carry in your photo bag a gray card, which is something printed with 50% gray, right? And it is a color that is considered 50% gray. It's a very specific tone and it's recognized everywhere as 50% gray. You put that in the picture, maybe the model holds it in front of her face, right? And some cards also have colors, and you just have a whole set of colors in there, and you print, you photograph the model with that lighting first, you let go of the card, you shoot again. Then you have something that you can truly compare 50% gray to, right? Like
Mhm.
right here, you could be using this here, you could be using this little eyedropper.
Eyedropper, yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't. You could turn this eyedropper tool on and then go click on what you think is 50% gray. You tell me, what do you think is 50% gray here in this picture? It's kind of hard to tell, right? So I'm going to click over here if I think that's 50% gray, and then that happened. And then I'm going to go, oh, well, I'm going to click over here if I think that's 50% gray, and then that happened. And I'm going to click over here if I think that's 50% gray, and that happened. So unless you really can tell on an image what you think is 50% gray, which if you don't have a card, it's kind of impossible, right? Then you might as well at this point do your best with things the way I was just telling you, right? Just using your eyes, because I'm not finding a single setting here that I'm clicking that makes me feel like I like the correction. You know what I mean? So in the end, it still is kind of subjective. I have let me just turn this off, because everywhere I go, it takes the, there we go. So no, so that was the long answer, so to say, to that was that, so I'm gonna bring this back because I think this got too blue. So I had it somewhere over here before. I don't remember, I had it somewhere over here. That's about where I had it. I don't know. That's about right. So there's a tool, but that tool isn't necessarily that useful. There's cards, and then you totally click on that 50% gray card that you photographed. Everything adjusts to what's neutral, and then you start from there. The chances of having that card with you when you take a picture, unless you're professionally shooting and you're doing it on purpose, it doesn't work. If you change the light, like if you have lights in here and you make her look into in another direction, you bring the light closer or whatever, then you have to put a 50% gray card in front of her again. So if you're shooting products for professional photography, like you're shooting a product that you want to sell and you're putting those photos in an image and you have them in the table, you definitely put a 50% gray card in front of it, right? Because you're setting up your own lights. But in real life, out in the landscape, and you saw a beautiful flower, it's hard to believe that you'll be carrying that one.
And for someone who's so new to all of this, where do you get the gray card from? Just anywhere?
Oh, actually, there's a trick of how you can print your own, or you can buy one professionally. I'll go over break. I'll see if I can go find mine to show you. But you can also print. You can find a way to. I have a little handout of how you can just find what's 50% gray in your card and print it out if you have a good printer. But yeah, so I'll show you that. I'll go find it. If I don't find it today, I'll bring it next class. Okay.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
yeah, by the way, if you're in town and is saying Sammy's, yeah, you just go to Sammy's and ask for a 50% gray card. But if you just go it online and write 50% gray photography, whatever, you'll find them. Alan, you have
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, my camera raw image is different from yours. Like at the lower left, you have those, after the percent, you have the 3 symbols, and I don't have them on my screen. That's when,
these 3.
yeah.
Maybe, do you have an updated camera raw version? I mean, no, but this has been here for a while.
Well, it's starting with Photoshop 2021.
No, it should, there's no particular way to change the workspace of the raw image. So if it's not there, all I can say, mine is raw 14.1. Do you have a different?
Yeah, mine says raw 14.1 also.
Huh. So these 3 are missing. I don't know. Why would they be missing on yours? Maybe I really don't know the answer to that. Sorry. It's something I would have to research. I would have to Google, why am I missing some of the icons on my raw, I would have to go and do that kind of thing and discover the answer to that, because I really don't know.
It's not worth going to the trouble. I think I'm doing fine
Yeah.
following you without that.
Okay. There are some things for which we will use this. But if it's about coming up and down, you can just do that yourself by dragging this up and down. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. I said a while ago I'd give us a break, so let's give us a break. I'm gonna stop my share for now. Let me see, what time is it? It's 10:37, so let's be back at 10:47. All right, that'd be back at 10:48, because we're about to switch. I can see from the seconds. See you guys in 10 minutes. Hello. I'm back. Are you all on your way back, or are you back, or are you running down the hallway when you hear my voice? Heading back. All right. Now, I wasn't, let me just, while people are coming back, I want to be slightly less, not that I was flippant with my answer to Rashmi, but I wasn't, there's tons of ways to fix skin, to fix landscapes, to fix colors, and there's tips and tricks and techniques. And they are not the kind of stuff I can teach in Photoshop 101, which is what this class is. I have been talking, there's a conversation about having Photoshop 1, 2, 3, but also I was thinking more than Photoshop 1, 2, 3, because really what makes you more advanced once you know the basics is specific things. Like I was thinking of proposing a class of skin retouching or printing or landscape, stuff that's more specific, where I can get much deeper into, like, this person can be made to look like she's like, a high fashion model with perfect skin. Or she can be made to look like she has not a single wrinkle or not, or what's the best way to fix her. Well, many times depending on what's the corrections that you want. If she has to be the cover of a magazine and she's not a personality, then you'd probably smooth out all her features so she doesn't even look like herself, but she looks like the perfect model. If on the other hand, she's someone who's, famously known for being herself, you want to keep her looking like herself and keep her skin texture being her own, but maybe lighten the wrinkles or brighten the color of her eyes a little bit and stuff like that. So I can show you some of that stuff here, but there's just more to it than that. So my recommendation is, once you finish this class where you understand the basics of masking, the basics of corrections, the basics of how to modify and use the tools, then you can, I'm looking at the, getting distracted by what Anne Rich just wrote. Then hopefully by then I can have a whole another series of classes that I can, lead you through more stuff, but you can actually start Googling things that you want to do specifically and understanding those tutorials. A lot of the times I find that people who don't know Photoshop go to tutorials and get really lost because they immediately assume you know how to do a lot of stuff, right? And they're too advanced. So my class, this Photoshop class, is more like how to use the tools, and then you can start applying them in many different ways. Many years ago, I had a class here where I was able to teach a class that each time we tried a new technique. I think Bill still here was in that class eons ago there. And each week I'd bring a new technique in and we'd try something new and different. But I also needed the class to be at a level where they could understand that. It's been impossible to do that within this certificate anymore because the class needs to have a syllabus and we need to kind of teach that syllabus. Even though I do it with different images, there's things I'm supposed to teach you in particular. But this other class was part of the non-credit, like the free classes, where the fee-based classes where people had to pay a fee, and then I could choose to teach whatever I wanted. So I'm considering what the options are to be able to teach different things than what I teach here. So if that works out, I'll let you know and you guys can follow me a bit more. But basically, when you have a better understanding of how to use Photoshop, you'll be able to also follow tutorials. And there's great free tutorials on LinkedIn Learning, which you guys have access to because you are students, where you can learn, put in the text in there called skin retouching, and you'll find stuff there. I caution you about Google and skin retouching only because you, as I just said, when you write skin retouching in Photoshop in Google, you'll find 9,500 tutorials. And then the question is, who is really telling you things that is a good way to do it, and who is telling you things that, there's so many people who still are teaching, or old videos that show you how to do things in a way that we would never do it now, or destructively or stuff like that. So you gotta, by having an idea of what's right or wrong, which hopefully I'm teaching you in this class, when you see those tutorials, you'll be able to kind of discard the ones that are not so good and understand the ones that are better and stuff like that. So there's a lot of self-learning. There's only so much I can teach you, and there's a lot you can teach yourself. Anne was mentioning that they have great cards that you can put on your keychain. My question about that is how far or how near you would have to have it to, I guess you could, because if you're taking a landscape and you have the right here, how does it come in focus? You would have to have it big enough that you can still use it. Maybe you can just change your focus to that and then change your focus to the background, stuff like that. But for people, that would be great. All right, Ken, your hand is up, but it was at the end of last big break. So is it the same hand or is it a different question?
It's a different question.
Okay, great. What's your question?
Yeah, so here's-
Oops, sorry, that's my dog barking, but I'll mute myself for a minute because someone's arriving. I'll hear you if you ask.
So my question is, what is the advantage of using Camera Raw versus just going to Photoshop? And the context is, so if I have a 100-year-old black and white photo, if I'm one of the photos I'm going to work on is, it's a little over 100 years old and it's black and white. Is there an advantage for me to going into Camera Raw?
Okay, so yeah, and in part, what I'm showing you here right now are some of the basic things that you can do in Camera Raw. I haven't shown you some of the bottom tools yet, but in Camera Raw, you can do a lot to the image before you start doing all the things that Photoshop is famous for. And okay, let me just give you okay. I need to finish today's class for you to understand the difference. I kind of have gotten, I got stuck here showing you some more of these details, and I wanted to show you a few more, but I haven't yet shown you, but I haven't yet shown you the difference between using Camera Raw or not. So maybe I'm going to do that next instead of showing you more of these details, which are better shown with a couple of different images when I actually show you a raw picture. So let me give you an example, because this is a little bit, someone had asked something at the beginning. And when I went into Photoshop, I showed you how in Photoshop, this other image that we did not open in raw, you applied raw as a filter and or you had adjustments. Now we haven't gone deep enough into adjustment layers or raw for you to really be able to tell yet what the difference is. But one thing that I really want you to notice is that this image, if I turn all these off, this image, when I opened it in Photoshop, it was completely unfixed. It was how it came, right? And in Photoshop, I began to make these corrections. This isn't the right one, so these corrections are fake, but I began to make these corrections and layers above and below and stuff like that. Versus this photo, once I am done here in, now that I look at it after having not looked at it for a while, it's looking, I don't like, it's too bright, but maybe because I had messed around with the colors while I was doing stuff differently. But anyway, when I'm done with this here, and there's more I could do, what I'm going to do now, and just watch, and then we'll do it together. I'm going to just hit the word open. So don't do it yet. And I'm going to hit the word open. This is just demo. So when I open it in Photoshop now, the flat beginning version of this image, okay, which is what I have right here. Hold on. Oh, I'm on VDI. I was trying to use it wrong. This is over expanded, but the flat version I have here is already the fixed version. The fixed to as much as I just fixed it, right? So I'm starting in Photoshop way ahead of the game than if I had started with the bad photo and had to produce all of these corrections inside of Photoshop. I'm already starting with something that I consider my beginning. And now to this, I begin to go, okay, I want to get rid of her wispy hair. I want to brighten her eyes. I want to darken this. I want to take all the red out of her cheeks. I want to take all the moles and the pimples out. I want to, so all of that you do now, but you've done a lot of the basic color and texture and exposure and all of that fixing. So you're not starting with a bad photo like we had before. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
Now, in this photo, I was showing you that you could still have brought in a bad photo and you can still call in the camera raw as a filter in here and use it as one more thing you turn on and off, which the correction I made here just for show is not a good one, but it's a correction. You can still choose to do that in here, but then that will have to be mitigated with other layers and other masks and other stuff. So if you know you're going to be using camera raw, it's cleaner to use it ahead of time. Bring the photo in straight as fixed as you can. And then that's why there's also something to be said for not doing everything in camera raw. If there's some things that are better done in Photoshop than in camera raw. So you do a lot of what is good to do in camera raw. And then you work in Photoshop for the rest. So like you wouldn't do a lot of sharpening in camera raw if you're still going to work with this photo in Photoshop to do a lot of work with it, because then all of sharpening degrades the image. So you're going to wait until you're done with the image until the very end. And the last thing you do is sharpening, right? And so stuff like that. So once you begin to understand the processing, you'll know when to do one or the other. But the main thing is to just, hold on, an alarm. The main thing is to, that camera raw is very, 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 it's a very good all-in-one tool. I'm not going to say it's simple to use. I'm going to say simple. It's not simple to use. It's all in one. A lot of things can be done in camera raw that 90% of the photographs need, and only maybe 10% really need what Photoshop has to offer. You know what I mean? Because a lot of photos just need to be fixed with light, with color, with depth, with saturation. All of that can be done in camera raw, but which is part of Photoshop, by the way. But the thing is that camera raw is also part of Lightroom and Photoshop Elements. So if you know how to use camera raw, you already know a big way of using Lightroom as well. Only Lightroom stops there and Photoshop continues, and that you can do much more. And I'm not trying to say that to diss Lightroom. Lightroom is wonderful, and it has its place for people who do tons and tons of photos. So professionals who done, 500 photos of a wedding, and they need to fix all of them at once. And they need to do very general corrections to everything all at once, because the lighting of the certain venue was too green. They make everything in 500 photos. But if you're going to go into the details of just the one photo, and you need to really alter specific things to one photo, then you need to move into Photoshop, right? So it's just different tools for different creatures, but the same things that you have here. And of course, there's people who are going to say there's detractors of either one. A lot of professional photographers never touch Lightroom because the color management there is supposedly really bad. Others will say it's the best thing ever, and I can't even imagine going into Photoshop. So you're going to have lovers and haters either way. But I don't think it's a matter of love and hate. I think it's a matter of knowing how to use both and choosing and picking and choosing what you want. But unless you're someone who takes like tons and tons of photographs, Lightroom seems overkill for me, because it's made for not overkill. Photoshop is the one that's much more intense, but Lightroom for a single photo is almost like the processing is the whole setup of the program for a beginner and how to handle your photos can be so much more complicated because if you make a mistake with the catalogs or whatever, that in the end, unless you really have series and series of photographs to photograph Photoshop to know, then I'd rather use Bridge, which is the big tool of Lightroom, and Photoshop for individual photos, which is what you're learning here. And then take the Photoshop, take Lightroom class with Bruce and learn what's your best. Ed for here, for example, uses other tools. And he's now trying to learn Photoshop. So that's the way to do it. You're someone who just learns a bit of each and then picks and chooses what you want, right? But in Photoshop, what you need to do is decide when it's worth it to fix it first in RAW and then bring it into Photoshop, which, by the way, RAW is part of Photoshop, but you transition from Bridge into Photoshop, ready to go. And when it's better to first bring it into Photoshop and fix it from inside. Okay, and that's the things that I'm going to be hopefully giving you enough of an idea what to do. So the original question you had was the black and white. yeah, there's a lot you can do to black and white and raw. There's a ton you can do black and white to raw, and then there's a lot you can do to black and white in Photoshop as well. So I would suggest do the same process. First, bring it up in black and white in raw, do as much as you can to it. And then when you reach the limits of raw, then you come into Photoshop and you continue forward, right?
Then, so then what I do is I'm in RAW, I've
Mhm.
worked on it, then I click open and it automatically opens in Photoshop.
Yeah, so we're gonna go through that process now, and
Okay.
what I wanted to show you guys is that I did open mine in Photoshop. See, here it is, at the whatever stage we had gotten to. But if I go back to Bridge now, I want to show you one new thing. You guys are still in Bridge in RAW, or you should still be in RAW. When I go back to my Bridge, see this little setting that right now is popping up, this little like that this one doesn't have, this, that one has it too. This one has it too. This means that it's an image that has been processed in RAW. Okay, so as I said, if it's a JPEG and you double click a JPEG, what's it gonna do from Bridge? If you double click a JPEG, what's it gonna do?
Open up.
In what?
Photoshop.
In Photoshop. If you double click a RAW, it's gonna open up in RAW. If you double click a JPEG that's been processed in RAW, I'm gonna do it, it opens up in RAW because now it knows, so now I'm double clicking on it and it's, and it's opened up in RAW again. Okay, so when you've processed a JPEG in RAW, now it's first goes through RAW because maybe you want to change something. Maybe you didn't like this. Maybe you want to add some of that. Maybe you want to take away some of that, whatever it is that you're about to do. It opens that back in here. So RAW is something that you can change all the time. So let me actually go back to, this is where you all should be. Okay, so we're going to do that now, but instead of saying open to go into Photoshop, what we're going to do right now, everyone, wherever we're at, we'll stop at this point of correction for now. And we'll head down and we're going to go and say done. Careful, not cancel. Cancel will eliminate all your changes. We're going to go say done. Okay, so if you're not, for chance can't see what I'm pointing to at the bottom of my screen, maybe Liz, you're having an issue. Down, down, down at the very bottom, you have open, cancel, and done, right? We're going to say done. All right, I'm going to close my Photoshop version.
Mine won't let me open.
So when you said done, you went back to Bridge, right? Did everyone say done? What happens when you
Yeah.
said done?
I got an error.
What's
It's
that?
unable to, I have an error
Oh.
that says unable to save the raw conversion settings.
That's
too.
true. That's true.
Because I think it's the
You-
shared
It's
drive,
the
right?
shared drive. It's a shared drive. I forgot. Okay, so I should have had, for those of you who are in VDI, when you say done, it can't save it because the shared drive, you can't save your changes to. So go with my correction for now. Next time I'll show VDI people at the end of this class, I'll show VDI people how to move your files into your personal Google Drive, the classic files, so that you can open up from there. So you can save your own settings, okay? Yeah, so for now, the VDI people won't be able to save their own raw corrections, but that's a Google Drive thing, not a Photoshop thing. Okay, so the whole point is that for everyone else, it saved back. And now if you look at your JPEG, you all should be seeing this little setting here that says it has been processed in RAW. Is that so? And for those of you on VDI, you see mine. Okay. Now, what if you come back tomorrow, right? And you look at that and you go, oh man, I don't like where I left it. I want to work more on it, right? It's completely editable. It's completely changeable. You can keep forever opening and closing and fixing this because none of this was done in a way that was permanently affecting your pixels. So it was all non-destructive modifications. That's one of the huge advantages of RAW. well, and everything I teach you to do in Photoshop too, but it is completely editable, completely scalable and changeable. So that photo has been fixed up until a point. And when you say, I'm ready to work more on it, you double click on it again. So everyone now double click on it again. Now we're going to open up again, and it's going to open in RAW again. So you have to make more corrections, do more things. Sorry, I have an alarm set in the middle of this class that keeps bugging me that I need to turn off for next Friday, because I keep turning it off, and I slap at it to shut it up, but then in 10 minutes it pops up again. All right. So now we're back in RAW. We're seeing our image again. We choose, we change, we do whatever else that we do or don't want. For now, we're going to say that this is all we're going to do. And now I don't want to say done again, because done again, we already saw what it does. It maintains the choices, the corrections that we've made, right? And if I want to change them, it opens up into this again. I can keep saying done and have that be it. Have that be, I'm done with this photo. Or I can say, no, I have more to do to this photo. And it's the kind of stuff I can only do in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead, and there's an open button here, but it also has an arrow. There's different things, different ways I can open this photograph in Photoshop. So if I just click open, which let's not do that yet, then it opens up as a flat image as the beginning, as I showed you already in Photoshop. If instead you go to this tiny little arrow, you can choose if you open it. Regular open, someone's talking on their phone or something. There's some background noise somewhere. Okay. So there's the regular open, which would have been the same as clicking open. Okay. Then there's the open as object or the open as copy. Now, I haven't shown you yet what a smart object is in detail, but that's what it means, to open as a smart object or open as a copy. If you open as a copy, you'll get two of the same. Right now, I don't need us to open as an object or anything. So let's just go ahead and back out of there and just say open. Or if you're in this mode, just say open. But you have choices of how it opens. Right now, we just want basic open. So now click on open. Open as a normal image. Now it was my family who's talking, so I was telling them to.
I'm venting.
All right.
Fucking guy, the DMV.
Deanna,
Yeah.
quick question.
Yeah.
If you've already edited some photos in iPhoto, should you go back to the regular before you start moving anything over into Photoshop?
It depends. I'm also teaching the iPhoto class where I'm teaching people how to edit things in iPhoto, which has a huge amount of corrections, very similar to what we were just seeing here in the raw. So do you want to bring the already edited version or not is up to you. I haven't told you that, but in iPhotos, you can choose to export the unmodified original or the modified original. And it's up to you. You might want to try both. If you export one of each and then put them up and see which one you can get even better. But whatever you export as modified will be ingrained as the beginning, kind of like this raw, like it'll already be ingrained and you won't be able to back off from it. So if you're not, so if you think you did a good job with it, then bring it in here and continue. But if you think you can do better, then bring the unmodified and start from 0.
Okay, so that becomes the 0 when you move it over the way it is.
Yeah,
Okay,
that becomes the
you.
0, the
Thank you.
beginning. Yeah. So by the way, I know that there's been a couple of hands. Let me just finish with this and then I'll start getting to hands. So basically here we go. We've opened it up and see it's flat. And now anything else we want to do to this one, like we want to lighten the wrinkles, we want to lighten up the area of her eyes, maybe change the color of her eyes, change the color of her robe, give her a different background. Maybe she's standing in front of the mission, all that kind of stuff needs to be done in here, okay? And here's the negative. You can't go backwards. You can't go back and say, oh, I wish I hadn't, you know, we didn't do many changes to this. All we did is change exposure. But say you did a lot of changes that you then wanted to back off. You can't, if this is your beginning and you work on this one now for 2 hours, this is still your beginning. Like this is considered what's correct. So you first need to make sure you like your raw processing from the start before you move into this. I'm tempted to just do also another class that's just raw processing because there's so much we can do inside of that to make this photo almost ready to go. But once you bring it in here, you can't modify it anymore versus, for better or for worse, this photo where I put raw inside, I can also always just double click the camera raw filter, open it up again. And from in here, I can go ahead and modify it again because it's still just a filter. And now I'll say, okay. And VDI is going really slowly today. I'm trying to do it. It's really not responding. Let me just cancel. Hello. 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 Not doing its thing, huh? Sorry, I'm trying to get it to cancel or to do. Let me stop my share for a minute. When it gets really resistant, sometimes sharing. It's good frozen space. My VDI. Oh, okay. It's application code. My whole Photoshop canceled. Just so you see what's happening. I've had an issue. Notification was closed. Would you like to visit? No. Okay. So my Photoshop crashed. I was for whatever reason. So I was trying to show you how the one that I had opened with raw as a filter, I could still keep editing that base layer. Is it better? Is it worse? Most people try to get their raw correct first and then apply everything else in Photoshop. It's easier, but you can do it both ways. So now I'm going to go, hopefully this time I'm going to see if it goes back in and opens Photoshop again. Meanwhile, I'll answer more questions. So yeah, Anne, thanks for, by the way, all the notes that you're putting on the chat, helping people out with their questions. That's really helpful. What's your question?
So I think if you open up a raw image in RAW, then it always saves the original, right? But if you open up a JPEG in RAW, does it save the original?
Great question. In a way, yes, because as I said, this little icon here, that means that if you double click, you get back into RAW. You can eliminate all these corrections and be back to your original.
Right, but
because
sorry, if you open a raw image and you work on it, and then at the end you flatten it, it still has a copy of the original.
You don't ever flatten in RAW. Never.
Or at the end of Photoshop, sorry.
At the end of Photoshop, yeah. So what I'm going to tell you right now, thank you for saying that. Most people haven't gotten this far yet, but you never, ever, 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 ever flatten your original, ever.
Right.
You should never flatten your original. So that's never even an issue. You will always export out a version that you flatten to print or to put on the web or to whatever. So you should never be flattening any of.
So at some point, because someone told me that to always make a duplicate right from the start, so you always have your original and you don't work on your original, but you're going to show us a way once we're finished working
as long as
on
you do it non-destructively the way I show you, there's definitely, you will never affect it. But that thing that comment that someone said is true. You should always have backups of all your photos. So if you're going to start working on a photo, you should always have it backed up somewhere. which is equivalent of doing a duplicate. So you should have all of your stuff for forever. If it's your special photos that you've taken, one version of it is never enough. If your computer crashes, is whatever. So you should always have a duplicate set, either because you're doing a backup, if it's a time machine backup, if you're a Mac person, a clone backup if you're a PC person, up online. You should have a backup somewhere that keeps the stuff safe. And then you have the ones that you work on. That said, do a save as at the beginning and start from the beginning, or even from the Finder, create a duplicate and then work on that one. That's also a good idea. But also Photoshop used to be used in a very destructive way. And now I'm teaching you to use it in a non-destructive way. So as long as you follow the non-destructive models, your base layer is always your original. And that's how I teach you to edit Photoshop. So, but is it still a good idea to have a duplicate made just in case? Yeah, it always is a good idea.
But when once you've finished working on it and you've done all those changes, isn't the file really big? And do you really want to save that, or?
Always, the file can be really big or not, but at this point, files, I mean, can you imagine if I fix this lady and I do a ton of layers, and then when I, get much better in Photoshop, and 2 years from now, I look at it again, I go, God, did I really do that? Let me change that and fix it. If you have flattened it, you have forever altered that one. You can't fix it, versus now you can just go into a layer and do it better, right? It's editable forever if you leave the layered file. Maybe you wrote one text on it and you want a different text on it, but it's flattened, you can't fix it. So no, you should always get rid of all the flat versions, except for the original that you've output, but you should always keep the layered version. Hard drives aren't that expensive anymore. Space is not as such as premium as it used to be when we started with Photoshop. So that's kind of an old idea that doesn't need to be held on to anymore. And definitely a layered file is big, but not so big that you should be tossing all the hours and hours of work you put into it ever. Because then you can just say, I want to change the background. Oh, I hate how I cut out that tree. Now I know how to do it better. Let me try it again. But you don't want to retouch the entire photo all over again, right? So yeah. No, great questions. Thank you. Liz.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. So raw file as an adjustment layer. I'm not actually seeing how you did that, where you, I know how to add an adjustment layer, but
not as an adjustment, as a filter. We did it last week. Right now I'm not going to work with that, but we'll come back to it. But
No, okay.
Otherwise, it's what we did last week.
I
That's
thought it was
raw
as an
file
adjustment
as a filter. No, as a filter.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So now now that my Photoshop opened up, I can go back to the just simple open version. Here I am in Photoshop, where we should all be, except for that my Photoshop crashed on me. Let me see now if I can. It really isn't happy. It's all right. All right. So one thing that I was needing us to do is inside of Photoshop, we're all in here, right? So save it right now. And at this point, I will do something really, really simple, which is change the color of her gown, right? So we're gonna do it. There's two ways we can do it. And we have only a little bit of class left. So I'm going to show you the quickest way to do it, not necessarily the only way nor the best, depending. But I want us to select her gown to change it. Now, the decision to select what you want to change depends on what's the easiest. And in this case, the easiest thing would be to just select the green stuff to change its color. So there's a couple of tools here on the left side that are going to help you with that. And so if you head down to the fourth tool and you click on it, there's these three different choices in here. There's object selection, quick selection, and magic wand. So I'm going to have us go at this point, we could be using either the quick selection or the magic wand tool for this. Let's go to the quick selection, which is quicker, as its name suggests. and you click and hold to pull up all three of them, because you might have had this icon look different depending on which one you had before. So just go to that fourth icon. When you click and hold, you'll see all three. And if you have never used it, then the default one you will have probably will be the quick selection tool. Okay. Now, once you've chosen it, your mouse will have a circle around it in some shape or another, depending on where you used it last. So mine has a really big circle around it. Some of you might even have just a little crosshairs. That depends on the size of the brush. So this is a brush, right? And depending on the size of the brush that you have is that circle. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that right here, this number 200, that's the size of your brush. So you might have 45, you might have 2, whatever number you have there is the size of your brush. So the long way around to fix it that I don't use, but just to show you, before I show you the shortcut, is to click on this little arrow right here, and there it says size, and you can change the size of your brush to bigger or smaller. See when I pull it out how I made it much smaller? And here I'll make it even smaller, and to the point that if I make it so small that it just looks like a little crosshair, see how crosshairs, that means that I only have 1 pixel selected. If I have it over here, it's so big that it's a humongous circle. All right, now I don't like doing that per se myself, because then I have to do this to see the size of my brush, this to see the size of my brush. So what I do instead is I use the shortcuts, and there's 2 ways to use the shortcuts on your mouse. The easiest one is to use the key and the keyboard. Another one is to use your mouse. Depending on the mouse you have, though, that gets into a lot of trouble because a lot of people have pads and stuff like that. So if you don't have a mouse, or if you just want the easiest one, go to your keyboard and find your square brackets. And if you don't know where your square brackets are, look for the letter P, and they're to the right of the letter P. So then you can tap on your square brackets to make this bigger or smaller by tap, 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 tap. Left bracket make it smaller, right bracket makes it bigger. Okay, smaller and bigger. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make it small enough that our circle fits comfortably inside of the green. Like we don't want a huge mouse like that, because then we'd be touching some neck and some background. We don't want to touch neck or background. We want to touch just green, but it doesn't need to be too tiny. Okay. So now when I'm here, I'm going to just click on this green area, and then maybe click again and keep dragging. And all the area that's green is going to be surrounded by little marching ants. And then I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to do it again over here, and 1 or 2 clicks. That should take care of grabbing all my green stuff. We're going to get better at doing good selections in future classes, but this is a good starting point. So did that work for everyone? You all have a good selection of your green? Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create an adjustment layer. An adjustment layer is always about color or light, which is all we've been doing in the raw too. We've just been doing color and light. Really, that's all we've corrected up until now. So adjustment layers do the equivalent thing of color and light. So with these adjustment layers, we could have been doing even or equivalent things to what we did in raw, but we would need maybe 5 adjustment layers versus 1 raw tool. Okay, so that's the advantage of raw. So here we have the one that changes colors, which is hue saturation. There's ways of working in color here beyond this one, but this is the hue saturation tool. Click on the hue saturation tool. And notice that right above my background, what came up is this layer. Last time, this thing had been like blank for us, but this time it's not blank. If you can recognize the shapes, this is what surrounds her neck. This is her gown. What's white is her gown. What's black is her face in the background in this mask, right? So what this means is that when I work on this layer right now, only the white stuff will be affected. Okay, so none of the face or the background is going to get changed in color, but the white area in the mask is that which we selected. That is going to change in color. So I'm going to go over here to this top thing that says hue, and I'm going to drag this around, and I'm going to make her have any color gown I want. How about I make her have like a little golden kind of gown and make it more saturated. Now, remember I said this is not the best selection in the world. See how around her neck, she still has a bit of greenish there, but as I said, we can work and correct the selection a little bit later, but anyway, so has everyone been able, I'm gonna add some saturation to make it maybe a brighter yellow, or maybe a little bit less, more like a golden. Maybe a deeper gold, so I can work with saturation and lightness a little bit to change the color till I find a tone that I like. So I went from the green gown to a golden gown, and you could have chosen whatever color you chose. And by the way, your hand is still up. Is that still a question? Or is it the
Yeah,
before?
from
Okay,
before,
great.
sorry.
That's fine. So Liz, do you have a question?
Yeah, so when I clicked into the adjustments layer, I lost my layers window and I can't seem to find it again. Is there another way to open just like to access the layers windows up in the menu maybe, so that if it disappears? I think my, because I'm on
Yeah,
the,
but the adjustment layer wouldn't have made it lose it. But yeah, go up to the word window and click on the word layers.
I think there's just isn't enough room on the screen for it all. So, okay, window and
Layers, but just that the adjustment layers are part of layers. So layers wouldn't have disappeared. Something else would have disappeared. Like this would have disappeared maybe. If not, I'll ask you to share, but since class is almost over, I'm gonna
Yeah,
finish
it's okay.
this for everyone and then I can help you. Let me just conclude with this. Okay, so so here we go. We have added an adjustment layer, which if I, as I said, I'm going to move close up to it by doing Command or Control plus, or Command and Control minus makes it smaller, Command or Control plus. So if you're on a PC or on VDI, you have to hit the Control key. If you're on a Mac, you've hit the Command key and then hit the plus, plus, plus to get really big. Then hit the space bar to get your hand and move down here. You'll see, depending on the color you chose, like if you chose blue, you won't see this so much, but I chose a color that's very different and I can see that little layer. So that means I need to adjust my mask, right? Because the mask, as I said, the quick selection tool is good, but not perfect. And so we need to work on that on getting that to mask it a little bit better. But overall, and we're gonna do that, we're gonna get much better with our masking. We're gonna work on that next week too, when we keep doing that. But that was a correction you couldn't have done in RAW, a real specific portion of the photograph. So this is an example of using RAW to start with to fix an image, and then using different tools, some of which are adjustment layers, a lot of which are adjustment layers, to keep working. So for other details that we're going to do on her face, for lots of other corrections that we're going to do, we're going to keep using other tools, and they're going to pile up and it'll become an image that has many layers, which is another reason why you want to have the RAW ready to come in as flat, because that avoids maybe 10 adjustment layers that you would have had to, you know, in order to do. We didn't do that much in RAW this time. All we did was lights and darks, and that we could have gotten rid of with just one, just the curves could have done that here. But we could have done much more in RAW. And then by the time you come in here, it's all done and it's all flattened in one layer. You know what I mean? But it's not purely flattened, because if you ever want to truly change it, you can go back into RAW, fix it, because this now, and this is where I wanted to continue, is not that same file anymore. This is now a new file that we need to save as a layered file. All right. So yeah, thanks, Mary. So this file here cannot be the JPEG that we started with anymore. This is now a layered file. And when we try to go save it, even if we just try to close it right now, it won't let us. Like if I just said, okay, I'm done, I just want to close it and click on this little like X to close it, it's going to go, no, you need to save the changes, right? Because we made a change to it. So we can say yes to this, or we can just go ahead and say save as, which would have been what was right to do, because we need to save it. Plus all you VDI people won't be able to save it because you can't save onto the hard drive. So I need to show you how to do that. So let's go ahead and say save as. Again, if you're at home in your own Photoshop version, you don't need to show this window all the time. Just click on don't show again. I need to keep having it on because I have to always demo it. So then in the VDI, so say save on your computer, but your computer, VDI people, is going to be the Google Drive. The rest of you guys go ahead and save it wherever you're going to save it. And notice that by default, it's saving as a layered file. Google people, VDI people, go to Google Drive And as I said, you cannot share in the shared drive. You can only share in my drive, your drive. Okay, so double click my drive. And then over here, we created a folder last week, but in case you didn't stay behind to create it, we created a folder here with Photoshop files. So I'm going to go ahead and I think we called it my Photoshop class files, but say you didn't create it yet. How you create it, VDI people, you click on new folder right there, and then you put a name like Photoshop class files or whatever it is that you're going to do. I'm actually not going, I'm going to undo that and save it in the one that we created last week, because we did create it last week, but some of you guys weren't here, so I'm going back to it. And sorry, I have so many different classes with different places. So we had created my Photoshop class files that created February 4th. So I'm going to double click on that one. And here's where I put my work done Joaquin from last week. And now I'm ready to save it. I don't even need to change the name, because it just, the fact that it's a .psd means that it's now Photoshop. Okay, so just if you've managed to save that, just to complete this, now we have two of these photos. We have the JPEG with the raw corrections and the layered file with an adjustment layer, where suddenly her gown is not the same color anymore. So we have two versions of it. Okay, and if this was the bridge for the people who are at home, now you have two versions of her. You have the JPEG and you have the layered file. For VDI people, since we had to go save it somewhere else, we have the other one saved in a different folder, but we still have two of them, one in each folder. Okay, this one, the JPEG, will always be available if I turn off all those filters, which I could even right click here and just completely delete, get rid of all of these settings, go back and which one is it? Develop settings and camera raw defaults. That would put it back to being the original JPEG. This is to Anne's question, just getting rid of these choices, or open it up in JPEG, continuing to modify all of in raw, all the things, and then work on it in a different way. Versus the layered file that we now have has that beginning flat, and now we work and we continue forward with it. So those are the two steps. Does that make sense, you guys? So questions about that? I'm going to just keep answering questions now. So there's nothing new, although many times in questions, new things get answered. So if you can hang around or, to listen to more things. But other than that, we're going to come back next Friday. But you guys do have homework. Find photos, put them in folders that you want to work on, and photos that are on your own, so they're easy to access, and then work on them. And as I said at the beginning of this class, please have them ready to share. Ed had one ready to share. Don't be intimidated by how good his was. He does this and he's done this for many, many years. I want you to show me your basic shots that you're making better, because as long as it's better and different, you are working on it and you're working your way into getting a good shot. Okay. And I will try to set up this Padlet that I mentioned at the beginning of the class, where you can all just post the things that you're working on, so that the class can see and comment, and we can have it be a bit more of a community kind of thing. Which lately it's you guys send things to me, but I'd rather it be everyone see everyone's photos. So you'll get an email from me probably over the weekend when I'm done with it, or by Monday, about how to do that. And then you probably don't even need to set anything up. If I send it to you, you can probably just click on my link and do it that way. All right. So bye to everyone who needs to drop off now, and I'm going to answer some questions. Yeah. Let me stop my share for the time being. I usually try to say goodbye. I'm noticing that I'm looking really, at this time of day, my background is so bright that you probably don't see much of my face. I have the light in front of me too to light my face, but it's not good enough. All right. Liz. Nope, you already have that.
Sorry, I just didn't lower it.
Oh, that's fine. Anne?
Could you just quickly recommend an external hard drive to back up our files on?
Or? Oh, I'm not very good at that in the sense that, no, meaning I don't, I'm the kind of person that does what you're not supposed to do. I just go to Costco and get whatever's on sale. But if you, and then when it dies, I get it, or it's when it, after a while, I get another one and I pass things on to there. But that doesn't mean they're bad. They have Seagate. That doesn't mean they're bad. But you can do anything from spend $100 to spend $10,000 on really expensive ones. So I don't have a gauge equipment wise, how it depends on your budget if you want to spend on one that's better rated or not. Seagate is what I use because it's what Costco has, and they've always worked really
Okay.
well for me. But professionally, for people who are professional photographers, and they can spend $2,000 easily on a hard drive, because I am professional, but I don't want to spend that much. So I just, if they go bad, I keep changing them. I have enough backups that it doesn't matter. I just
How do you
back
know
up.
they
I
go bad?
back up my backups.
How do you know?
There's two ways they go bad. If you're lucky, they start clicking. And if they start clicking, you got time, you got to run to buy one and transfer all this stuff. If you're not unlucky, one day they just don't work anymore. If you're not lucky. So if they click, it's good. If they don't click, they just one day don't open. So I always have backups of my backups. So, just so you know, that's the way to consider yourself backed up. You need something in 3 places. So there.
Okay.
I've
thank
only
you.
had a few in my life die, but when they did die, they just died. Yeah, that's true. I do. Ed's writing that he Backblaze. I use Backblaze as my internet, as the way to back up all my drives online. So I have my physical backups. I have a clone of my hard drives, and then I have all of that backed up to online. So it's crazy, but that's what you got to do when you really can't, these are professional photos, I can't lose them. Or even if it's your family photos, God, even more, you can't lose them, right? So, but backblaze.com also is the place where that's what they do. They back up drives, and they know a lot about drives, and they have a lot of information about drives. And so he's saying that they have a quarterly report on failure rates of their thousands of drives. And you also stay away from Western Digital. Have heard bad things about Western Digital. Yeah. But and meaning, again, from reading stuff, like from Backblaze, not from my own experience, but yeah, just from reading things, which is how you learn a lot, because if you don't have your own.
Thank you.
What did you say? You can use software to monitor your drives rather than clicking. Yeah. I always try to, I try to stay away from things that are too technical. If you're going to get really technical, there's a tons of way of doing this. Here's a straight answer. There's a ton of software that can check your stuff and give you answers in very technical ways that if you don't know how to read it, you still don't understand what's happening to your drives. So if you have software that's easy to understand, Ed, for maybe people who are coming to this class who are not really, in-depth on people who understand technical things, like he's a computer guy. So if you have something that's simple to use that we can recommend, I'd love that. Is that what it is? ISTAT? ISTAT is the software you're
iStat, and again, I'm a
iStat.
Mac user, so
yeah.
I don't know on a PC, but iStat, it has on top bar, it's giving me meters for how fast my internet is, how full my drives are, if I'm having a lot of performance on it. It's all graphs. You don't have to really thing. And if then it gets into an area, it sends you a notification. So you see that.
Yeah. So if you're a Mac user, that works. If you're a PC user, I don't know. The one who teaches a class about a lot of this internal stuff of computers for PCs is Norma Egley. So if you know her, if you've taken every class as a PC user, Windows user, you can ask her. Anyway, I just have enough backups, and I keep them, I try to keep them in good shape. I don't abuse them. And I've only had one time that a drive just one day wouldn't wake up that surprised me. You kind of begin to see things that aren't working, things that start kind of being a bit wonky, and you've been going, this might be my drive. So, but I also have a couple of apps that I perform checkups. EditorCheck is really good also on my system. EtraCheck. I think it's called, let me put it, EtraCheck is really good to just check your whole system. Anyway, there you go. Ken, you have questions?
Well, my VMware screen just froze, so
Oh, mine
I
did
guess-
too. You saw how I had to
Yeah.
restart? Yeah.
yeah, I guess I'll just exit that part of it then.
Yeah, there might
And,
have been a glitch at the college level or at the
Okay.
VMI level, because remember how my Photoshop just
Yeah.
suddenly just did a weird thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you who are on VDI, I showed you last week how to gently back out of VDI really carefully. So you should always keep doing that. But if you freeze like he does, then you'll just have to, my thing would be, if you froze and you backed out and you had to just shut it off completely, try to get in it again, and then do the correct back out so that next time you come in, you have a clean version of it, if possible.
Right, because
Okay.
because it's frozen, I can't click the X arrow on VDI. I'm just gonna have to X out of
Close the whole,
VMware
yeah.
Horizon, right?
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Exactly. And then that means that if you have a chance, give it a time, rest it, maybe when the Zoom is off, so you don't have the system using it, get back into VDI. And sometimes it'll start you from scratch, but other times it'll start you in that midway, and then you can just back out gently.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, you guys? All right. Cool. Thank you for your feedback, Anne and Ed, who are providing a lot of their know-how into the class. I appreciate that. And thank you everyone for good questions. Work on stuff. Doesn't need to be an awesome photo. It can be the last photo you took of the pot that's outside your window. Just work on it. Any photo can be made better, or at least different. And that's the only way you're going to hone your skills to figure out what's right or wrong, right? Is to just do the stuff enough and then print some, like have some professionally printed every now and then when you have something that you think is good. And you can even print your before and afters, which at first you'll spend a little bit of money, but then that helps you really compare to the before and after on your computer. Really, in the end, that's the only way you can truly tell what's happening in your monitor. Even if you have it color calibrated to the most utmost, the only way to test that it really is color calibrated is to have a printout of that from the same place, and a place that's professional that you can trust is using also good systems of printing themselves. Because if you go to Costco, who knows who's handling the machine that time. Great as it is for family pictures for my mom when I travel, I use Costco, but when I want a real print, I would go to, definitely a professional printer. So, all right. Thank you guys. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Diana, I have a quick.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Bill, yes.
Okay. I had a quick question. If I am the reason I'm doing this class is because I want to take professional pictures of my craft
Perfect.
and put it on my Instagram account.
You should definitely get a great card.
So with that said, and that's the reason why I asked you that question, is what's a good quality of what
Well,
am I looking at? So
Yeah,
having
so here's the thing I'm going to say with that professional photos. My husband's a potter. I put all his pottery online. You can color correct your monitor. You can put a great card, have the most color correct image in the world. But if you're selling online, showing your craft online, the people who see your craft and want to buy it will see it through their uncalibrated monitors. And they will think they're getting a bright green, and when they receive it, it's a mint green, and they'll go, oh, this is what I ordered. It's because their monitor was wrong. So you can only control your side of it to the best of your abilities, but that does not mean that anyone else who's online on their phones, on their tablets, on their monitors is seeing what you put up there. And so that's the limitation, versus when you print a catalog for your material, you can do the best to have the catalog be exactly the colors that you're selling. But online, you're still at the will of the gods. But you should never, because of that, not control what you put up. You should still control what you put up, but you're still at the whim of what they see.
And you should always put a disclaimer that the color might be different than what they what appears.
Hmm.
on your
Yeah,
screen.
always. There's no way. You cannot control people's computers. I have no idea what face you were seeing. The face I was seeing was one and you were seeing another. And the same thing will happen to your art. You will put the best, to the best of your ability, the cleanest, clearest, most obvious representation of your art up online for you. But even if you look at it through another screen of your own, you'll see that it looks, oh, that's not the green of my, I mean, I put up my husband's pottery in the most best color calibrated color process ever. And then when I go look at it through his monitor, it's like, because, you know, glazes, his pottery, his green and my green don't look the same. I know mine is right. But
So, is
yeah,
there a
okay.
specific software you recommend that we can download, or is that a physical device that comes?
The calibration monitor,
Mhm.
it's a physical device.
Oh,
So here I just showed you this one, which is the one is my
I
new
can't
one.
see it because now I can see. If you put it in front of you because your thing blurs anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the one that I just bought because I used to have,
What is it called? I can't.
hold on, I know, I'm trying to, there it is. I just
Da-
bought this one, the data color. This is the Spider X Elite. You put the name.
Okay.
And Diana, isn't there somewhere on the raw processing, if you do shoot with a gray card, there's some little point somewhere when you go in with your photo and you,
Yeah, that
Click.
little eyedropper that I showed you. If
no,
you have
no,
a
there
photo
was,
with a great card. Oh,
I thought there was something where if you had a gray card, you could actually click it
yeah.
somewhere.
So
in-
no, that's what I'm saying. If that same photograph that I showed you with the eyedropper that I tried to click on parts of her face, if in that photo I had a card, I click on the card.
Okay, okay.
But that
yeah.
said, you also need to be careful how you use that card because you might
Right.
have had it a little bit like that towards the light, a little bit like this
Right.
against the light. So you still need to be careful. It's
Right.
not like it's that 100% easy to use,
Yeah.
but if you have it facing, you know, straight on and the same, like if the person's light looking like that, right? And your camera is like that, and you put the card here, you're going to get that the same
Shadow.
as that versus if you get it there. So you need to maybe try it in 2 or 3 different places, and then you put them up, you click with that eyedropper on that card, and all the photo gets corrected to considering that's neutral. And then
Okay,
you use that
perfect.
setting to correct the rest that don't have the card.
It's been a while.
Yeah. And then then you can go even more in depth, but that's the simple tool that's sitting right there. And then there's a whole setting up inside of RAW just to keep working with color in Photoshop and so on and so forth. But that's the quick way around. All right,
Thank you.
I'm gonna try to get more in depth with RAW. More of the people in this class are a little bit more advanced than in other times, so I'm gonna see if I can do a bit more in depth RAW than other times, and get as far as I can. All right, guys. There's other brands. There's Color Monkey is the calibrator I had before, but the Color Monkey stopped working. The version I had stopped working when I moved up to Catalina, I believe. So up until for many years, I had the Color Monkey, and then in Catalina it stopped working. They might have come up with another version. That was an easy one to use as well. There's different levels of you know, you're going to spend anything from 300 to 500. These things are not cheap. So you need to make sure you need it first, given, as I said, that others won't really see it. So maybe start selling it first, have a bit of income from that, and then go, you know, I'm going to spend on a calibrator and see if then that makes a difference. I mean, you do want to try to do your best, but if it's not print based, if it's online based, there's only so much you can do to control it. As a web designer, you have to just kind of, and as a perfectionist that I am, you have to just go, okay, I'm going to give this one up. I can't control the world's prints. You know, that's all you can do. So,
All right. Thank you.
all right. You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.